Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 0.09 of Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Today we're going to take a look at how Chloe put her head into it. We're going to see if Gnome really got $1 million from an anonymous donor. We're going to check out Valve Essential, look into the GDPR, and take a deep look at Lutris and Wine Gaming. Let's roll. And we're back. Thank you for joining us again here for our beta episode 0.09 of Mostly Gaming. The only podcast that focuses kinda mostly on gaming, but not really, and kinda mostly on Linux, but only sometimes. But what can you do? We want to appeal to everyone, and thank you for listening. It's fun. It's been a little bit of a mess actually getting this episode out. I recorded about half of the episode earlier today, and I won't even get into it. The feed wasn't right. Anyway, just call it brain farts on my part. So I had to pause. Drive people around town for various things, family members and what have you, came back, took a look, and boom, unusable content for the first, I'd say, maybe 45 minutes that I recorded earlier. And yeah, started over again right now. Hopefully this is going to be okay because I'm not doing it a third time. Trials and tribulations of podcasting. But you know what? Everybody should have a creative endeavor. Something that you do on the creation side rather than the consumption side. You know, we spend so much time on content consumption that if you spend a few hours or even more, that's better, more is better, on creation, really kind of clears the soul and keeps your brain nimble and thinking. We started the week off on a crazy basis as well, crazy note, and ended it on a crazy note. So that's what you have. Last Sunday, podcast had been put to bed. Everything was good. If you may recall, it was a long weekend here in Canada as we celebrated the kind of birthday of Queen Victoria, the monarch who created our wonderful country as an independent nation. And so, you know, the kids and myself decided to get together and play a game of Acquire. Pretty good board game. I would highly recommend it. My wife played the night before and was just about acquired out, so she went to watch her crime shows. And we played for I'd say about an hour, maybe 2 hours. We started at about 10, so this was about midnight, kind of near the end of the game. We heard crying from Chloe, our little kitten. Who is incredibly curious and likes to basically jump into things that she doesn't belong. So my wife in particular, we've got stairs in the house. She's, stair-proofed them so that the cat doesn't kind of slide down, fall off, kill herself, and hurt herself in any other way. I, of course, teased her for, the amount of work that she was doing in terms of house-proofing the house for a little kitten. I said, kittens get into trouble. That's what they do. But kittens are also kind of designed to get themselves out of trouble. But no, my wife wouldn't have it. She's going to house-proof the house, and thank God that she did. Because at about midnight on Sunday of last week, we heard some crying. It was clearly Chloe. It was a cat crying, meowing. And we started looking around. Where is the cat? Couldn't find the cat. But we heard the crying coming from the rec room here in our castle, Mostly Linux. And we found her behind a cabinet with her head stuck into a hole. Let me see if I can find it here. I'll get to that picture in a second. So here she is. For you guys that are not on YouTube or Twitch, this is a picture of a rather disturbed-looking little kitten with her head in a hole. And Chloe got her head into this tight little hole here somehow. Now, my view has always been that cats, the way that a cat's head is shaped is that if they can, it's the widest part. So if they can get their head through a hole, they can kind of shake their body enough to get the body through as well. Now, this particular hole was very, very tiny. But she, managed to get her head through it anyway. But the other side is an electrical cabinet with, the type of thing that you have like in your family room or in your rec room, where there is a mechanism that lifts the TV up and brings it down. So there's no way for her to get out once she goes in, and it's filled with wires in the mechanism in there. So she stuck her head through the hole, and then in trying to get out, she got caught in the wires inside and was stuck. So I'm not sure how long she was stuck there trying to fight to get out, but she couldn't get out. So my son gently tried to see if we could figure her out. Of course, I assisted. And then you can see here in the picture that she looks a little greasy, because what we did is we got some Vaseline and tried to rub it all over her body, especially around the neck and the head area, to see if we could slide her out. And that wouldn't work. I mean, the wire was jammed. She couldn't get out. We didn't want to hurt her, and we were stuck. What do we do? Chloe can't come out. We thought, well, let's get like a saw. Let's see if we can cut her out. But the way that her head was positioned could be very dangerous. I don't know about you, but I don't feel comfortable getting a saw in. And tried to cut her out. No, I'm not going to do that. Besides, my daughter would scream in a fit rage if we started getting a saw through here. So after about an hour maybe of trying, my wife said, "Damn it, forget it. I'm calling fire department." And you can see here the fire department, came in and started looking around. There's these three gentlemen here, full-time firefighters coming in. Apologize for the low quality picture there with the light, but that's the picture that we took. And they started investigating. How do we take her out? They tried to wiggle her out. They tried to move her around. They tried to kind of figure out the best way to get her out, but that's not happening. The way that it's stuck isn't gonna work. And eventually they decided to get a saw of their own. That picture's not great quality and I've blown it up, but they decided to basically get their own tools that they had in the truck, and they cut her out gently. Well, not her, okay? Just to be clear, it was not the cat that they cut. It was the cabinet around it, and Chloe was eventually freed after about 45 minutes of the fire department coming in here to do the work. Crazy stuff. Apologize to the neighbors. I mean, these guys came blasting their horns in the middle of the morning. Good thing it was a day off for everybody on the Monday. But Chloe, I guess, you know what? The old saying about curiosity, it's curiosity that kills a cat, certainly applies to her. You're one lucky cat, Chloe. You almost didn't make it out of this one. But we're glad to have you, and glad that you're fine. Anyway, we're going to be back right after this with the news. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us here on Mostly Linux with Mostly Linux on Mostly Gaming. Lots of news, lots of interesting news this week from our various information and news feeds. Most recently, this morning, right out of the gate, as we were starting to record this, Gnome announced that it got $1 million from an anonymous donor. And we started looking into it. $1 million is a great thing, and congratulations to Gnome, and great thanks, obviously, from the anonymous donor. The press release. This is not the press release. Let me find the press release. Gnome press release. 1 million. Donation. Here's all the stories here. So see the stories, how they say basically that anonymous donor pledges 1 million donation. Gnome Foundation to receive 1 million from anonymous. Mystery donor pledges 1 million to the Gnome Foundation. That's clearly the news, but is that the reality? And when we actually looked at the press release, it is really not that clear that that is exactly what is happening. But let's take a look into it. And I apologize, in the first round of this recording, I did have the press release up, and now I do not. Where is your press release? Press releases, there we go. Okay, so let's take a look at this press release. Again, the headline of the press release is anonymous donor pledges 1 million donation over 2 years. And just to make it clear, that is wonderful. Whatever the amount is, whatever the terms, whoever you are, that's fantastic. And you know what? That's the lifeline of free and open software. It is donations of not only money but time and effort and skill. And this is fantastic. Good news for the Gnome Foundation, which says that it will invest the money in growth, unspecified growth, but. It's not really quite that simple. First of all, let's take a look at it. I'm just going to parse this out because I do not expect that it's going to get picked up by the media sites or really that they are going to care. But we might as well get to the reality because it's right in the press release, right? So an anonymous donor has pledged to donate up to. So that's the first kind of, when I was reading this, I kind of thought, up to is not $1 million. Up to is maximum of $1 million. And that is typically a weasel word in press releases or in contracts where you basically want the amount to sound higher, but you want the ability to kind of get out of it if certain conditions aren't met. The conditions here of the up to are not specified, at least not in detail. So to be clear, notwithstanding the the headline, the anonymous donor is pledged to donate up to $1 million. So the number will be $1 million or less. That's fantastic. In any case, but it's not $1 million. It's up to $1 million. It's going to be over the next 2 years, so not immediately, and some of which will be matching funds. So the donor is not donating $1 million. The donor is donating some other amount, and then with matching funds, it will be $1 million. So that is kind of the second caveat. Okay, so clearly, putting this into a headline doesn't make any sense, but it is at the very least misleading. The donor is not putting in $1 million. He is putting in some amount, up to some amount, which is not specified, and then with matching funds, not clear how much of the $1 million will be matching funds and how much will be the donor and what the terms of the matching are. They will get to $1 million over 2 years. The Gnome Foundation is grateful for this donation and plans on using these funds to increase staff, to streamline operations, and to grow its support of the Gnome project and the surrounding ecosystem, as you should be, which is fantastic. The executive director, Neil McGovern, then goes on to quote and provides some additional specificity about the donation here. I'm very excited to lead the Gnome Foundation during this time. Yeah, no kidding. We're honored by the trust given to us and will work hard to justify that trust. This particular donation will enable us to support the Gnome project more widely and tackle key challenges that the free software community faces. As a substantial element of this donation is matched funds. Okay, so that is interesting. A substantial element of this donation is matched funds. That is quite the caveat. So the donor has pledged some amount, but most of the amount, or at least a substantial is another weasel word, right? Because substantial doesn't mean most, but it doesn't mean not most, right? It means a big part of it. But big is also a weasel word because big could be 90% and big could be 20%, and that's the same for substantial. So this could have been, for example, a $100,000 donation, and with matching funds they need another $900,000, and that's what they're calling $1 million donation. Or it could be $500,000. I do not expect that the donation was any more than $500,000, because it's matching funds, right? So if you're going to match the funds, I expect you're going to put in $500,000, and other people are going to match the balance. But it's not clear, and they are vague on purpose here for whatever reason. And I don't like the vagueness or the sense of purpose that they have created this press release to be as unclear but slightly misleading at the same time. So a substantial element of this donation is matched funds. We will continue to fundraise for general events and specific projects and hope that the generosity of all our donors continues. Details about this donation and the areas of investment will be announced individually in the coming weeks. So we don't know what or where the money is going to go to. We don't know where the money came from. We don't know how much money was donated and how much money will be matched, other than it is a substantial element of it. And we don't know what the terms of the up to are. So, well, everybody's busy patting themselves on the back, and hey, any money is better than no money. This is a horrible press release. It is misleading, and I think it's misleading on purpose, and I don't know why. What the purpose of writing such a misleading press release is. In fact, this press release raises more questions than answers, and I think Gnome should basically open up and give us the details at some point soon. Perhaps when they decide to announce details and areas of investment individually over the coming weeks. Right. Thank you, Gnome Foundation, for that. But the interesting thing is, again, it served its purpose, because if you take a look at the news, the news doesn't get into that. It just basically says, mystery donor pledges $1 million to the Gnome Foundation, which is not true. They put the quote in there, but they do not, in this story, for example, by Brian Fagioli, they do not actually go in and explain any of the details, which is unfortunate. I mean, that's your job as press. What can you do? Let's take a look, though, in terms of jumping from one kind of thing to another. If you remember, the Steam Link was released for Android and iOS last week with great fanfare. We tested it out. It was fun to use. Works well. Don't know if it works the way that this picture here is showing it. I tried it on the Steam controller, but in any case, Valve claims that they got approval from Apple to put this on the iOS store, and just after or during the point that the app was released, Apple came back and said, "Nuh-uh, we're taking this off the store, and the Steam Link app for iOS is dead as Apple rejects it. And we're taking a look at this article from Macworld, which talks a little bit more in detail about it. Valve put out a statement, and here's what they said. On Monday, May 7th, Apple approved the Steam Link app for release. On Wednesday, May 9th, Valve released news of the app. The following morning, which would be May 10th, Apple revoked its approval, citing business conflicts with app guidelines that had allegedly not been realized by the original review team. Valve appealed, explaining the Steam Link app simply functions as a LAN-based remote desktop similar to numerous remote desktop applications already available on the App Store. Ultimately, that appeal was denied, leaving the Steam Link app for iOS blocked from release. And this is one of the reasons why I hate Apple. I mean, this is a streaming app. No different than, I believe, PlayStation Now, which is available on it. Though I may be wrong. Let's just kind of quickly check. Is PlayStation Now maybe I'm wrong, but let's take a look. PlayStation Now iOS. PlayStation app on the, okay, that's the app. Sony finally brings PlayStation games to Android and iOS. I don't know if the PlayStation Now streaming app is available on it. It's something to check in for another time. But what about Google Remote iOS? Yep. So Chrome Remote Desktop, which is also a streaming app, is available on iOS, but this is not. Which, I don't know. You know what? Apple is so protective. Games are the -- category on the iOS store and Android, right? That's the moneymaker. And Apple is clearly paranoid about protecting the cash cow that is iOS games. They get 30% of everything, and they get nothing off of this. But this is not, this is a streaming app, and it is, it's unfortunate. I'm not going to go into it any more than that. I think both Google and Apple are distasteful, to be polite. And you can't really choose who is less distasteful. Apple, I'll give them credit, makes some great hardware, and they do not sell your data to third parties, but they do use it themselves, but they don't sell it. Their business is basically clipping coupons from the App Store and selling you hardware. Google, on the other hand, their business is selling your data and clipping coupons as well. But they're less fussed on the clipping coupons because they monetize the user base by selling the data and using it themselves for all sorts of purposes. And we're going to touch on the GDPR in a minute about that, which is the, we'll get to that in a minute. I don't know. What can I say? I think that's horrible, but come on over to Android, or better yet, wait for the Purism Librem 5 and pop onto that. Hopefully that works. I'm really optimistic about Librem 5, the Purism Linux-based smartphone. I've got mine kickstarted. It's actually not a Kickstarter. Let's call it pre-ordered. Last I heard, it's going to be out first quarter of 2019, and hopefully they're making progress on that, because I really need to replace my Essential phone. And unfortunately, the Essential phone, the second iteration, has been reportedly canceled, and Andy Rubin, the founder, is looking to sell the company. This article here from Gadget Hacks calls the Essential phone one of the most underrated phones of 2018. I believe it came out in 2017, although it was late. I have an Essential phone, and I can say from my own personal experience that I was very disappointed in it. I replaced I had a OnePlus 5 which broke, and I needed a quick replacement. I went to my TELUS store, which is my carrier, and was not overly familiar with it. I'd heard about it. There was a lot of buzz about the Essential phone, and I picked one up. It was well priced, and had a nice Snapdragon 835, which was state of the art at the time. Good storage, nice wide screen, and I've never been more disappointed in a phone ever, in any phone that I had or have ever had. It was glitchy. It was prone to crashing. I'm on my phone is like an extension of myself and my business activities. I need a reliable phone, and this thing would crash daily, and I couldn't figure out why. I would complain loudly to Essential. I was told that they were aware of something, which whatever the case is, I don't remember what it was, but it was related to something in the version of Android that it was using, or how it had customized the version of Android that they were using, and that the next version would fix it. Meanwhile, do this, and this to try to prevent the crashing, which I tried to do, but it would still crash. When the next version of Android came out to the Essential phone, it did fix the problem, but that's not a good way to start a relationship with your new customers, right? Two main kind of lingering issues with the Essential phone that I have. One is it is very, very thick, and maybe I was spoiled by how thin the OnePlus phones are. The OnePlus 5, 5T, and 6 are incredibly thin, very, very attractive looking phones, and I value that thinness. I put the phone in my pocket, and it's with me all the time. And the Essential phone is probably twice as thick. Now, twice as thick of something that is thin is, I guess, not a big deal. But once you get used to something, it looks ugly to me. I mean, the screen is beautiful, but it's so thick. It looks like some kind of last generation. It reminds me a little bit of the Nintendo Switch. When I take a look at the Switch on a table, it looks like one of those original, Kindle book reader things, the original Fire OS versions of the Kindles, if you've ever seen them. Horribly thick, ugly looking things, and that's what the Essential phone kind of brings to my mind. Not a positive. The second thing is I will never buy a phone without a headphone jack again. It is such a pain to have to manage the single USB-C power and sound component in there. And yes, you can use Bluetooth, and yes, you can put a dongle in, but that does not do me any good as a user. Okay, that is a bad thing. Okay, yes, it's a workaround, but it's not a positive thing. Why would I need to work around something when I can buy the OnePlus or many other phones and not have to work around? The Bluetooth, the headset, of course, and I've got a Bluetooth headset, but they need to be charged. There goes another thing that I need to charge now. Okay, I'm trying to basically move to things that I do not need to charge. Okay, so that is another pain in the ass factor that is added. Now I've got to charge my headphones, and when they're dead because I didn't charge them, then I can't listen to the phone at all. The second thing is, again, related to charging, is you cannot charge this phone, or as far as I'm aware, any Android phone with a USB-C charger, you cannot charge it and listen at the same time through the USB-C port. You can do one or the other. So if you are charging your phone, you can't listen to it. I guess you could use your Bluetooth headset, but that's a workaround as well. And that's just not the way that I prefer to work or listen to my phone. And, so it's dead. Nice try. It's a shame because there was a lot of potential here in this phone. Andy Rubin is a smart person. He raised an incredible amount of money and could have done whatever he had, but unfortunately, he dropped the ball. It says here that there is hope that whoever buys Essential will continue product development as all of the patents are rumored to be included in any sale. I highly doubt that's going to happen. I think this is going to go, it's going to be liquidated, and it's going to die. So, unfortunate. All right, let's take a pause right there because I want to spend a little more time talking about the GDPR in Europe, and Google and Facebook were hit with many billion-dollar lawsuits, and that probably requires a section of its own. We'll be back right after this.
So you may have noticed a ton of privacy policy emails lately from companies like Facebook, Twitter, Venmo, Spotify, this dating app I used to use, or Moo, which, to be honest, I have no idea what Moo even is, but I know they updated their policy. So the emails don't always say it, but those new policies are the result of something called the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which goes into effect May 25th. It's a new rule in the European Union that's rewriting how data sharing works on the internet, and almost no one is ready for it. Most people don't even know what it is. Even a lot of the Verge staff.
What is GDPR?
Data privacy.
Nope.
Really?
Nope.
Personal?
Nope.
I've heard of the term GDPR. Global.
I work here, but I really don't know.
I didn't look into it.
So it's totally okay to not fully understand the GDPR because it's really complicated, but basically it sets new rules for how companies can treat user data, with a particular eye towards tech companies. And even if you don't live in Europe, companies are rewriting their policies for everyone, which is why you're seeing all those emails. The big difference is that the GDPR's idea of consent is a lot more intense than previous regulations, so companies have to ask for permission more often. In concrete terms, that means a lot more click to proceed boxes, although the transparency requirements also mean the text inside should get a lot more explicit. Probably the most important change is how companies share data behind the scenes. Right now, visiting a single website might feed data to dozens of different companies for analytics, logins, and above all, advertising. But the GDPR means any company that gets that data secondhand will have to explain why they need it and what they're doing with it. So no more sharing data willy-nilly. Another cool thing is that EU residents now have the right to request their data from companies and ask for certain information to be deleted or corrected if it's inaccurate. Once you put in the request, companies will have 30 days to respond or face penalties. For a big company like Google or Facebook, the scariest part is the fines. If they're found to have violated the GDPR, regulators can fine companies up to 4% of their global revenue. So if that company is Amazon, for instance, that would mean a fine of up to $7 billion.
Okay, let's pause it right there because that's the next topic. So the General Data Protection Regulation came into effect in Europe on May 25th. And Facebook and Google were immediately hit with an $8.8 billion or in total $8.8 billion in lawsuits on day one of GDPR. And this is going to determine what the effectiveness of the GDPR is. Now, I don't want to talk about whether the GDPR is a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the overall, let's say, what is the impact to freedom in general, and what is the impact to privacy. Clearly, regulations limit freedom, which is a bad thing, but it's meant to protect privacy, which is a good thing. And I've gone back and forth as a non-resident of Europe, as a North American, as a Canadian, and as a libertarian, and I haven't made up my mind yet. There's pros and cons, I think, on each side, but I take it and try to figure out what is the root principle. What are the root principles here? And I'm going to come back and revisit the GDPR, figure out whether it's a scam or not. My gut feel is that it's not, but I need more info. But in any case, let's leave that aside. We'll make that a topic of the week at a later time and go through it in our own controversial manner. But Facebook and Google are hit with this $8.8 billion in lawsuit. And this is going to determine what the GDPR is. Because regulations are written by bureaucrats in Brussels or wherever they may have been. But they are interpreted by either courts or kind of quasi-judicial groups. And in this case, the GDPR requires clear consent and justification for any personal data collected from users. And these guidelines have obviously pushed a lot of the companies to revise their policies. And one of the keys is that users must provide explicit consent to companies that are going to harvest and use their data. And the consent must be explicit, meaning you must explicitly give your consent. It can't be implied, whereby Facebook says, okay, by using this, you agree to everything. Okay, that is not allowed under the regulations. What Facebook must do is ask for your explicit consent. This is what we're going to do. Do you allow us? Click here. Now, beyond that, my understanding is that they require explicit consent not for the total, not once in total, but for each of the specific instances, right? So we're going to use this data here on this site for this. Do you consent? We're going to use it for this as well. Do you consent to that? And you must consent for each instance. And you may be in a position where you can opt out of some consents and not use them, and continue to use the parts of that particular platform that you do consent to. So, you know, we require your consent for A, B, C, and D. Do you agree? And let me just move my mic. Okay. And you may agree to A, B, and C, but not agree to D. And then you can continue to use features A, B, and C and not D as a result. This privacy activist Max Schrems, who is Austrian, filed a lawsuit on the basis that the companies here were not complying. We're not in compliance with the GDPR. Of course, Google and Facebook have rolled out new policies that they say are in compliance with the GDPR. But Schrems' complaint argues that those policies don't go far enough. In particular, the complaint singles out the way companies obtain consent for the privacy policies, which is at the core of the GDPR, asking users to check a box in order to access services. It's a widespread practice for online services, but the complaints argue that it forces users into an all or nothing choice, a violation of the GDPR's provisions around particularized consent. And that's really the key here, this particularized consent. The GDPR, it can be read to mean what I said earlier on, that if you need to give consent for A, B, C, and D, and that it contravenes the rules if they ask you once and you give them consent for all four. Google and Facebook interpret the GDPR to not mean that. They have a different interpretation. And the only way that you can resolve differences in interpretation is to file a lawsuit. In this case, it's $8.8 billion US dollars, roughly about the same, roughly about 7 point something euros. And then go to the court and have the court determine what exactly the GDPR means. Okay, so you could write whatever you want into a document, into a regulation, into a constitution. That's what Supreme Courts do of many countries. The Constitution says something, but what it means depends on what the court says it means. And of course that drives people crazy. But in this particular case, if the court, or whatever the judicial body here is that makes this determination, sides with Google and Facebook, then the GDPR is dead. It doesn't matter what it says, because the interpretation that Google and Facebook are taking is so broad that it essentially mitigates the entire point behind it. And again, I'm not really sure whether I'm in favor of it or not. I tend to say yes, that I am, but need more data. But it clearly has a written purpose, and if the interpretation of it, and is so broad then it basically offsets the entire intent. Now, Google and Facebook have an incentive to want to take a very broad interpretation because their entire business model depends on implied consent and basically getting consent for all of the particular content that you're using and that they're harvesting. Of course, others, like this activist Max Schrems, would beg to differ. And if he is correct, it would seriously impact Google and Facebook's business model. And perhaps not only just in Europe, but as other countries jump on. And so they have a lot to lose. And so this is going to court, and they're going to battle it out. And whatever the outcome is here could change the entire internet for everybody everywhere. And so this is something to keep an eye on. It is something worth understanding. So I'm going to spend some time looking into it and looking to figure out at least what my own views are of the GDPR at this point. I have not spent a lot of time looking into it, but I'm a freedom advocate and I'm a privacy advocate, and this stuff just basically hits on both sides, and I need to kind of think about it a little bit further before I come out on one side or the other. So we'll revisit this at a later time. Meantime, we're going to come back after this. And we're back to this disaster. That is episode 0.09. Apologies if this is a little disjointed, just running around like crazy, and I don't want to get into it. Let's go back to the show here and take a look and see what is new and different this week. And I guess the big thing here this week is the spring cleaning event announced by Valve, where you can dust off old faves and uncover new ones, and you can get cleaning. You know what? I tried this. Don't have any achievements, I don't think, anymore. What they do is they give you like a list of to-dos, and including, playing some games that you haven't played. It gives you some ideas of stuff to play, and then I guess it gives you awards or rewards, or I think they also have some free games or free to play, or some games that are free for now. You know what? I gave it a try. There's the free to play games this weekend. So there's Dead by Daylight, Don't Starve, Dirt 4, and the first thing it did. Let's go to Can't Decide What to Play. Let us help you. We'll pick some random games from your library, and I guess the thing is, it picked games that were Windows only, and I'm set my preferences on Linux only, and so I guess some of these are in my library. This one, for example, is Outlast does have a Linux version. Yeah, maybe I'll give that a shot. Is it really? I didn't know Outlast had a Linux version. It does have a Linux version. Maybe there's some good in this after all. I haven't participated in it at all. I've had a crazy busy weekend and don't have time to go back and play games that I'm not already playing. Antechamber is also Linux. What do I have in Antechamber? Probably hardly any hours. Don't remember playing it. What else do I have here? Finding Paradise. This, I think, is Windows only. No, this is Linux as well. So maybe they fixed that. The first time that I did this, it gave me 4 Windows only games. They are in my library, but if you set it up as Linux only, it should only give you the Linux options. 0 hours on record for Finding Paradise. I have no idea where I got that from. December 2017, reasonably recently, and it's overwhelmingly positive. All right, so maybe there's some value in this. What's the 4th game they're giving me here? Inside. Anybody know this game? This is also overwhelmingly positive. Hunted and alone, a boy finds himself drawn into the center of a dark project. That is Windows only, so they haven't completely fixed it. All right, okay, I'll give you Valve. You've changed my mind. It seems like this might have some value. And anyway, so I guess you play. It gives you like a speed clean where you can play games for free. A spin cycle where you can basically play games that you haven't played, and then clear the backlog. Seems to be the same thing. Let's take a look and see how is that any different. Oh, so it gives you the list of all of the qualifying games in your library, and I guess you play them to some amount and you get something. Well, okay, so that's basically going to go on for the rest of the month. I don't know, maybe I'll give that a shot. Haven't decided yet, but why don't we go back and take a look now to spend a little time trying to figure out what is in our discovery queue. Here we go. Let's take a look at the recommendations that Steam has for me today. The first one here is Unforeseen Incidents. This is a brand new game, 24th May 2018. Let's play the sound here. Start it over again. Unforeseen Incidents is a classical style interactive mystery set in a beautiful hand-painted
I just found a
world.
woman and she's really sick. There's blood everywhere. I think it's Yelltown fever.
An area of farmland outside Yelltown is still in quarantine.
Let me reassure the people of Yelltown that the risk of very
The outbreak
small.
is now securely contained, and we are providing Yelltown with truly world-class treatment.
Someone I know, a doctor. He's trying to cure Yelltown fever.
It's not quite as simple as finding a cure. By all accounts, it kills in a matter of hours, not days.
The infected woman was talking kind of strange. She gave me an envelope for a reporter named Helliwell. I think there's something not right going on here.
Hear about Arbutus Hill? They got it same as Yell.
Alright, so it's a conspiracy, unforeseen incidents in a classical style interactive mystery set in a beautifully hand-painted world. Join Harper, Pendrell, and experience a challenging investigation, smart dialogue, and a rich cast of characters in this thrilling new adventure game. It's only got 5 user reviews, so it doesn't look like it's been crazy popular. Backwoods Entertainment. $23 in Canada. I'm gonna guess that's like $20 in the US. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put it on my wish list. It looks interesting. It's a point-and-click adventure, and it looks like the graphic style is pretty good. Like it looks like a legitimate game as opposed to some of the trash that they put in there. It's got some very good ratings. All right, Unforeseen Incidents. I'm gonna put that in the games for the wish list pile. What else do you got for me? Recommendations. We've got. Give me another one. Cendric. This is March 2nd, 2018, so reasonably recent. Cendric. Let's see if we can get. There we go. Cendric combines RPG and platformer elements in one game, featuring both a side-scroller and a top-down view. The player follows the story of a boy with no memory and discovers the magical but dangerous world of Admantris. Looks like a typical platformer, puzzle platformer. It's listed here, RPG. Iron Bell is the group, the developer and the publisher. You know what? It has some decent RPG elements. Just looking at the trailer here, it's a platformer with RPG elements, and let's put that into my wish list as well for down the road when my life has so much free time that I can play these games. Let's do one more. The First Tree. The First Tree is in my discovery queue as an indie game. It is a beautiful third-person exploration game centered around two parallel stories. A fox trying to find her missing family, and a son reconnecting with his estranged father in Alaska. Uncover artifacts from the son's life as he becomes intertwined in the fox's journey towards the first tree. Yeah, this one also looks pretty interesting. This one is a little bit older. It came out September 14th, 2017. Developer is a gentleman by the name of David Well, which I assume is a single developer, maybe, a small group. I have to say, it looks gorgeous. Reminds me of Okami in terms of the style. And it's available for Linux. What are the reviews saying for it? The reviews are official selection of the Indie Mega Booth, PAX West 2017. So there's a little bit of some credibility there. Very positive is the average rating and worthy of our wish list. So let's put that in there. Let's take a look and see what is new. I guess take a look quickly. New releases. Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. We were born actually in 1927, so let's just get that in there. This is not a new game. This came out October 2017, and it is not a game. It is some kind of a movie. Watch this 48-hour rental anytime in the next 30 days. Why? Why would I want to do that? Why am I getting that as a new game? Discovery queue. New releases. Where's my tags? Okay, let's give it one more shot. Let's give it one more shot for new releases. Be better this time. This is the same thing. All right, you know what? Let's take a look at the discovery queue. Pick the first one that's available for Linux. This is a movie too, so I've got 2 movies in a row. 3. Is my discovery queue all movies? What is going on? That is unusual. I have never seen that before. So that is something. Maybe Valve is pushing the movie and the rental side of the business, which is very, very strange. It's possible that I've made some changes to my preferences, but I don't think so. I haven't changed anything there. But what is this? This is Star Tower, which looks like a brand new game, released in fact May 25th, so it is a brand new game. It is Windows and Linux. Star Tower is a tower defense game in 3 dimensions. Play begins in 2D, but you may also navigate forward and backward, revealing the path to reach greater challenges. Features include nebula, obstacles, game-wide upgrades, increasingly difficult bosses, and special one-use powers. Kind of like a puzzle, action game, shooter. Do they not have a trailer here? Video? There we go. Let's take a quick look at it. Not for me, but if you're into that kind of puzzle, shooter, strategy, action, indie, casual game, then this game by Fuzzy Cube may be for you. All right, let's not take a break. Let's just go straight into what we've been playing. Let's take a look, because we've tried a few different things this week. Let's go to recent. Recent. There we go. All right, so yesterday we gave Serious Sam Fusion 2017 beta a go. You know, but this is another one of those games. I think I bought like in some Serious Sam Master Pack of whatever number of games. I've got them all and played none. So I was just sitting around, you know, looking for something quick and easy. Maybe I should have gone over to the spin cycle on the Steam stuff. But anyway, I give this a shot. And you know what? It was actually a lot of fun. I mean, it's stupid. You know, it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but and the shooting. I mean, as long as I was using a controller. As long as you're pointed, you know, roughly in the area of the enemy, then you're going to hit. Very, very forgiving from that perspective. Lots of fun. You know what? Looks like I put in about an hour yesterday. I'm gonna give that another shot. Far Cry Primal was, I think it's there because I was testing some wine stuff, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. Dark Souls Remastered is out, and I'm a Dark Souls fanatic. If I take a look and see where the original is on my list, let's just take a look at the regular games list. How many hours have I put into Dark Souls? This is Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 alone, I've got 482 hours. Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense. Dark Souls Prepare to Die is another 300 hours. The original Dark Souls 2 is 800 hours. And then another almost 500 in Dark Souls 2, and there's Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is another 400. So yeah, I play Dark Souls. Okay, so for $20 or whatever this costs, I'm going to play it, and I was quite a bit disappointed at first because it did not run in Linux. I installed it, it had some problems. I went over to my friends on Reddit though and posted my challenge with respect to writing it, using it, and then I worked with the community there and we figured the solution, and I have been playing Dark Souls on Linux at 60 frames per second at 4K. It's gorgeous. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in our Lutris wine discussion, but yeah, it was fun. I like Dark Souls. Let's go to the recent. Recent is the best way to sort your stuff. How many hours did I put into Dark Souls Remastered? So I've only played 3 hours, so I mean, I haven't gone crazy in it. I did put some more time into Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. I'm up to 7 hours now, working my way through it. I'm in the second major city, on the second major island. I've pretty well killed everybody there. I'm not sure if that's how you're supposed to play it or not, but I just went through. Somebody saw me, challenged me, killed him, and then I slaughtered every single living person on that place. And I'm supposed to be the good guy. Working my way through it, I'm very much enjoying Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, and I think I'm going to play that a little bit more tonight. But let's take a brief pause right here. And we're going to be back in a minute, and we're going to talk about Lutris and Wine Gaming in just probably less than a minute. In fact, a few seconds. And we're back with the topic of the week, which is exploring Lutris and Wine Gaming. Now, this is the whole concept of wine is something that I think splits the Linux community. Some people think it's a great thing, including myself, and others are of the no tucks, no bucks variety, meaning that if it is not native to Linux, then you are unpatriotic for buying it because you're supporting people that do not support Linux. I'm not going to jump into that debate. I think I've talked about it many times before. So for those of you that are interested in getting the most out of your gaming time on Linux, this topic is for you. And for those of you that are newer to Linux or newer to Linux gaming, hopefully you learn something here. But the best thing about the Linux community is that it is a community. And like any community, we have our arguments, our fights, our back and forths, but we also help each other out. And so going back to the Dark Souls Remastered situation, which I was talking about earlier, I bought the game and tried it out, and I couldn't get it to run. So I came over here to Wine Gaming, Wine_Gaming on Reddit, and I basically just posted, anybody else test this out? I tested with Wine Staging 3.8 and with and without DXVK and got the same error. It seems to launch, but with an empty terminal, fail error, blah, 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 blah. I told them the stuff that I had, and then there was 46 comments as we worked through the problems. Now, this is not ideal, having to go back and tweak and do all of that kind of stuff, but you know what? There's usually smart people out there that can help in every situation. And what I'm going to do is, in terms of some of these terms like Wine Staging 3.8 and DXVK, and some of the other points that we're talking about here, Lutris and DXVK feature level 11_1, we figured it out and it worked. And it works perfectly. And so, there's the thread if you want to go take a look at it. Some fighting back and forth about questionable loyalty for using this, and supporting non-Linux gaming. But look, between all of the Dark Souls games, I think, if you count them all up, it's probably 2,000 hours that I've spent. I'm a big fan of the series, and I use Linux. And I'm going to play the game whether it's on Linux or not. And if I can play it on Linux, that's even better, because I'd rather play it there. And if my operating system supports it, then why would I not use the power that is built in the apps that are ready and available in my operating system to play the games that I want to play? And there is no reason to do that. So that's my thoughts, and I'm not going to get into those details. Maybe that's a trick or a topic of the day for some other time. But let's again go in now and talk about wine first. This is wine tricks. So wine, let's just kind of begin with what wine is. Wine is an acronym for, it's a recursive acronym for wine is not an emulator. Wine is not an emulator. That's kind of like programming jokes, wine is not an emulator, because technically wine is not an emulator, and they decided to name it that because people say that you're emulating Windows or Windows on Linux, and technically that's not what you're doing. For general users, that's completely irrelevant. For technical users, it is not an emulator in the sense that it is not, an emulator is something that is taking the calls and pretending, creating a virtual environment, if you will, that is running on your system. Which is different than a VM. It's not a virtual machine. It would be more of a virtual environment. Where you are running Windows on your system and therefore emulating the calls. What Wine does is not that, which is why it's not an emulator. It takes the calls to Windows and translates them into the equivalent calls on Linux. So if you want to do X, the app that you're running does X, Wine takes that call and does that call on Linux instead. And so it is more of a translator. Think of it as a universal translator that translates the Windows calls into Linux calls. And that's as simple as it is. As a result, because it's doing that translation layer, Wine will always be slower than native Windows. And it will always be slower than native Linux, which is, if you really want the best experience, you want to go native. Native meaning something that is designed for your operating system, whether it's Windows, whether it's Mac, whether it's Linux. Now, so let's just kind of leave that there. It is always going to be slower. There is virtually no situation in which you can do the translation and run at the same efficiency as Windows, though sometimes you can get pretty close. Now, there are 4 versions of Wine. The most stable one is called Wine Stable. And this is the current stable Wine version. And it is a version that most people should be using, particularly if you are not a gamer. The issue for Wine Stable for gamers is that it is stable but lacks some of the compatibility, some of the new fresh thinking and solutions that are just coming up as games come out. And those developments are contained in what is referred to as wine staging. And this is the most recent testing wine version. So it is bleeding edge, but that comes at a cost in that it could be flawed in ways, right? So you've got stable, which is, stable, but not necessarily as compatible in terms of running some of the newer things. And then you've got staging, which is bleeding edge, but maybe not stable. You've got wine development and wine development that are various different levels. I'm going to ignore those because you should not be using either one of these. The 2 key ones that you're going to be using is Wine Stable and Wine Staging. You can tell the difference between the two because Wine Stable does not have the word staging in it. So if you have, for example, Wine version 3.9, that is the latest version of Wine. And if you have Wine Staging 3.8, that is the most recent testing Wine version. Now, I could be, in fact, I'm pretty sure I'm a little wrong on that. I think the full-on stable version is still probably back in version 3. So there's an interim version here as well that kind of pushes it forward, and then the stable version kind of catches up with slower updates. But again, for the purposes of gaming, that's neither here nor there. Okay, this one here, staging, is the key Wine version, and that is updated almost weekly. Which is terrific because they're making some great strides. So with that out of the way, let's what I do is I use something called Lutris for setting up and installing my games. And Lutris is, I'm not sure if it's named after this little badger or beaver or whatever it is here. It's actually, you can see here, it's an image of an Hydra lutris. And this is a type of badger. What kind of an animal is this? It is an otter. So I don't know if that's what it's named for, but I was trying to figure out what does lutris mean, and what came up is an Hydra lutris, which is an otter. I'd love to know whether it's actually named about that. But Lutris is a platform. It's an open source gaming platform for Linux. It allows you to gather and manage, install, configure, and launch all your games acquired from any source in a single interface. It's an incredibly ambitious project that effectively is designed to allow you, with one click, to be able to run a game across any one of a number of different platforms. So here is my Lutris running on my Solus machine here. And you can see that all of the runners that I have supported, you can support more. And you've got browser, libretro, the different kinds of things. I've got Linux, NES, SNES, Dreamcast, PlayStation 2 and 3, and Windows programs here. There's Demon Souls. I've got Final Fantasy 12 and Kingdom Hearts 2. There's Chrono Cross. And with one click, basically, I can install this. So if we go over here to, for example, Chrono Trigger, I can press play, and there it is running. It is running. It is emulating, in this particular case, the NES version. Let's kind of close that down. And so what you can do is you can basically take a look here by clicking on that button. This will give me a list of the games that it supports. I can do a search here. Let us do a search for Metal Gear Solid. And I can find all of the Metal Gear Solids. So this is the original PlayStation and PSP version. I can choose each one. Here is Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, Snake Eater, all the way up to Twin Snakes, VR Missions, Portable Ops, and so forth. Okay, so what you can do here is you can choose, for example, the Sony PlayStation version of the original game. Oops, and if I click over here, Libretro is the emulation system that it will work on. And if I go over here to install, Lutris will pop up and it will say, okay, which version do you want to install? Okay, the PlayStation Libretro version. Come on over here. Where do you want to direct it? Install it, and then it asks for the PlayStation image. So in this case, I can either put the CD in the drive, or I can find various sources to download the CD image file. One quick point here about piracy. It's wrong. I don't condone piracy. I condone the protection of the intellectual property of the people that were wonderful enough to make these games that we use and love. It's wrong, folks. Okay, I'm not your daddy though. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I don't pirate. What I do, however, and it is in keeping with the intellectual property rules here in Canada, and your rules may differ in depending on what country that you are in. But in Canada, we have digital rights to the content and not to the platform that it is played on. So, for example, I own Metal Gear Solid. I own the PlayStation CD here somewhere at home, and that by my ownership and purchase of that disc, I am allowed to play it on any system that I want. And so I'm free here to download the CD image file and then install it that way, as long as I own the digital version myself, or the CD, or what have you. And so typically what I do here is I basically install stuff that I already own. And if I don't own it, I try to buy it. I know it kind of gets in the way. I know it's a pain in the ass. I know it's inconvenient, but that's the law, and that's what I follow here, and because I agree with the law. So in this case, you would basically select the PlayStation image file, you would continue, and then it would install the game and allow you to play it, which is what I did here for Chrono Trigger. I got to the point where it was there, and boom, it just runs. Okay. Likewise, this is actually so Demon's Souls is new support was basically added for the PlayStation 3. When I run this, it's still not perfect. It gives me actually the RPCS3 emulator, and I can then run the game through here by clicking another click. Love Demon's Souls, as you can tell, because I am a Souls fan. So I am very giddy that I was able to play Demon's Souls on my Linux machine. But let's just go back a little further here and try to figure out who put this together and how it works. So as far as I can tell, the primary driver behind Lutris is this gentleman here who goes by the tag Strycore. And you can see it's an open source platform, so it's basically worked on by the community. You can see here the hours that people put into it, and the contributors and how many commits they've put in there. And you can see Strycore has basically put in 1,370 commits, and the person in second place basically is 109. And then 73 and 7. So this guy, Strycore, is the guy. This is Lutris, and his name is Matthew Commandon, and and he's out of Los Angeles. And so I looked him up, and Matthew is does a number of different things, but most of his contributions relate to Lutris, and I'm a Patreon supporter. And Matthew, thank you very much, because your app makes a tremendous difference to my ability to enjoy gaming on Linux. This is an extremely valuable app that you've developed, and thank you, and it's my honor to support you. Matthew Commandon, he's got his own website as well, and he's working on a number of different projects, including Lunchcraft. Looks like this is kind of some kind of a cooking app. He says here, I wish to create a platform that will keep track of users' eating habits. What's in their kitchen? Maybe I'm going to give that a chance. Lutris, I've been a full-time Linux user for more than 10 years, but I'm also a gamer. And so he put that together. He was also on Linux Weekly Daily Wednesday. I think he's definitely no longer on that, which is unfortunate. It looks like he hasn't updated this in a while. Yeah, so that's who that is. Let's go a little bit into Lutris now and talk about how it works. So you install Lutris, and what it will do is, if you register, and you should register for it, you can import games that you've already installed on your system, and it will synchronize them up with Lutris. So it will find all of your games that you have on Steam in particular, or any one of a number of other platforms, including Steam for Windows, and your desktop games, and your ScumVM games, and they will basically show up here on this grid. And so and it's actually it's a brilliant crowdsourcing platform. What people do is they then submit scripts that basically automate the setup and installation of the particular game. So if we go to 7 Days to Die, I think this is actually a Linux game. If I go install, in this particular case, it identifies that this is a Steam game for Linux, and if I go to continue, it will run my Linux-based version, native version of Steam, and install it for me. Okay, and then let's take the next game here, 8-Bit MMO. That is also a Linux game, so we'll do the same. Let's pick Alan Wake. Alan Wake is a Windows game, and there are two versions, the Wine Steam version and the Humble Bundle version. You can choose the one that you own, because somebody wrote a script for the Humble version. Somebody out there, some user, thank you very much, user on Lutris, who did this. And then somebody else basically put together something for the Steam version. So you would basically run that, click on which one you own, and it will just set it up. It will just set it up because the script tells it what to do. Not all the time, though. Okay, it works well when it works. The challenge, though, is that if you take a look here, Lutris is so ambitious, okay, that it has not only the whatever 20, 30,000 games that are on Steam, but games that are on any one of a number of these other systems. You know, if you take a look right down here, so there's Sega, there's PlayStation 2, 3, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx, Windows. You know, it has literally every platform, Atari ST, Jaguar, Commodore 64, VIC-20. They have set this up so that it can be one press install for almost any platform that's ever existed, which is outstanding. It is outstanding. And if you don't support it, support it. Because this is a Linux-only platform. Linux-only, okay? And it is outstanding. Now, it is not perfect, though, because there are so many different platforms, and things change so often, particularly on the Steam and the Windows side, that not every game is going to be available, and not every script is going to continue to work. So somebody might have, for example, put this script in here for the Nintendo 64. Well, you know what? For the Nintendo 64 versions of games, the scripts are probably going to work. They're old games, and they don't change. But for newer games, Windows games, games that are on Steam, you know, new stuff happens, and old things that used to work no longer do. Or things didn't work before, but now work better under new versions of Wine, but somebody hasn't updated the script. So it is, for me, I'm going to say, you know, roughly more than half the time, I'm going to say, but I'm not going to say it's 3/4 of the time. Somewhere between, you know, half and 3/4 of the time, this works on a one-click setup. The other half to 1/4 of the time, you install it and it doesn't work, and then you got to be a little bit finicky around it. But then you can go over to Reddit, like as I did, to the Wine_Gaming or the Linux_Gaming sub, and there's probably people there that can help you. In fact, there's always people there that can help you. Be aware, though, that you're going to have, you know, the person that comes in and gives you the no tucks, no bucks speech and whatever. I wouldn't even respond back to them because they get it out of their system, and you could move on and play your game. So that is, I mean, that's basically the long and the short of it. The biggest key development in the last little while on the front of on this front is something called DXVK, and you may have heard about this if you are, you know, in and around the Linux gaming community. And DXVK, I've talked about it before, is basically a protocol that somebody developed that converts DirectX calls in Windows, translates them into Vulkan calls. And it does for DirectX and Vulkan what Wine does for the other calls. It's a translation layer. It basically says, okay, DirectX wants to do this, let's intercept, and let's do that in Vulkan instead. And the latest, the most recent version of Lutris, the one that I have here is 4.17, has DXVK support built in, which is amazing because so many games now are compatible with Linux that were not before, including a game that I've been trying, and I mentioned last week as well, including Divinity Original Sin 2. But let's go in and I'll show you how to quickly do that. So this is Dark Souls. Now, just for the record here, I've already installed Dark Souls into the system so that we don't have to sit here and wait for it to download. But I'm going to do the setup here in Lutris, show you how it's done, and then I'm going to run it and see if it runs. This was notoriously broken before and would never run. And, you know, again, as a Souls fan here, that was a little painful because I needed to run Dark Souls in Windows. So I'm going to add it manually. You, if you are doing this, are safe just to press install, and it will install it for you. I'm going to do it manually because I've already installed it. So let's go to the install. The information is already in here. Over here it says select a runner from the list. I'm running Wine Steam. Let's put that over there. Let's go over to the game options. Over here you need to place the application ID. In this particular case, you always have to have the ID. What I do is I go back over here to Lutris if I'm doing it manually, and I just find the ID. Now, if you are doing this with the install button, of course you don't have to do this because the ID will be placed in already. Okay, so here's another kind of thing about it. Not every game is included. So in this particular case, Dark Souls 3 is not included in Lutris, and you can feel free to add the game to the database if you like. In fact, I would encourage that so that it can be there the next time somebody else is looking for it. If it's not there, the next thing I do is I go over here to steamdb.info, which includes data for everything. And if I type in Dark Souls 3 in here and do the search, I'm going to find it, Dark Souls 3. There is the app ID. click on that, and then let's go back to my dialog box over here and put that in. Done. Prefix architecture. I almost always choose to go with 64-bit for newer games. All new games are 64-bit. Older games might be 32-bit. Again, if you press the install button, you can just ignore that. In this particular case, you can also, if you have games that can run without Steam, that are DRM free, you can put the binary right in here and run your game DRM free, which is, for you DRM freaks out there, DRM free freaks anyway, that could be something that floats your goat. I particularly don't care, but I'm going to put it in there anyway because it doesn't hurt, and if it is able to run it without Steam, then why the heck not? I'm going to go into my Steam apps, Common, Dark Souls 3, Game, Dark Souls 3. Let's put it in there. If it requires Steam to run, no worries, it will know that. Let's go over to Runner's Options. I'm going to just let it know where Steam is, the Windows version of Steam is, so that I can find it and find my game. Here's the file. Okay, use that version of Steam. That's where I've got it installed. And in this particular case, when the game is over, I want it to close the Windows version of Steam. Let's run it without Steam if possible. Again, I don't think that's needed. And then over here, you've got Enable DXVK. I can't tell you how important this box that was added to Lutris is. It is important because installing a DXVK is a bit of a pain, and there's scripts and things that you can do, but for the casual gamer who just wants to play the games, it really is a pain. So here all you have to do is basically take Enable DXVK. Different versions of DXVK are listed here. Always choose the latest one, and that's basically it. One other little technical thing that I'm gonna, you can do this or you cannot do it. There is a command that basically can show you the information related to the DXVK conversion. Now, I'm going to put it in here, but I'm going to say most of the time this doesn't work, and I'm not sure why. And if anybody knows what I'm doing wrong, because the command is DXVK_HUD, the value is 1, that should provide the heads-up display that gives me the information for DXVK in terms of the version number and other information when I'm running it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I don't know why. So somebody that can help me with that, please do so. So let's save that. You can see that the icon here went color, which means that it is installed. And I'm just going to cross my fingers here and hope that it works here. Otherwise, you can find the other problems with this, and that is, as I said, sometimes it doesn't work. So let's take a look. Now what's going to happen here is it's going to set up the system. It's updating the prefix, making sure the prefix is the wine prefix for staging this and also for DXVK. Once it does the setup here, it gave me this warning here. I'm just going to ignore it now. It should run Steam. There it is. This is the version of Windows Steam, not Linux Steam. It's connecting the account. And if I'm lucky, it's going to run. And if I'm lucky, it's going to run. And if I'm not lucky, it's going to give me this white screen and not run. And there we go. And it's running. I'm getting 60 frames per second. OBS, by the way, does affect the frame rate. So if you're streaming, it will affect the frame rates. I'm using the Xbox 360 controller right now. Look, it's working perfectly. It's an Xbox 360 wireless controller. Perfect. Look, I'm getting 59, 60 frames per second on Linux. I believe this is now running at 1080p. It's always a good idea to run a resource manager at it at the same time. Sometimes, things can get glitchy and can get stuck, and if you're running a kill resource manager, you can see what problem is causing it, and when you have a problem, you can just terminate the program and get rid of it really quickly like that. Yeah, that's Lutris. It's outstanding. Like I said, I have all of the respect in the world for the people behind this app, this platform. In a future universe of whatever number of years from now, everything here is going to be one-click run. And I use this as my launcher. I've got games as old as Earthbound. Which is an old Nintendo game. You can see I've got Fortnite, which is not working perfectly, but I'm waiting for the day when that's improved enough to run here on Linux. You can see that I can run my Linux games, my Windows games, I'm running BattleNet. I'm also running Uplay on here too. So that's Lutris. That's Wine. Give it a shot. You got nothing to lose, and it's probably one of the most important. Maybe you take Steam, and that's like way up there, and then way kind of below that, Wine as a platform, as a program in general. And then below that, you've got Lutris. There's other ways that you can basically do this, and some people prefer something called Play on Linux, which is not geared as much for gaming. That's more for running general apps, games as well, and some people prefer doing that. You can do it straight through Wine yourself and ignore all of these launchers. The other way to do it is Crossover, I believe, which is let me just take a look. Crossover is a commercial product. Or is it Crosstalk? It's Crossover. Crossover Linux. This is a commercial program, so you pay, whatever the amount is. I think it's not that expensive. It's by Code Weavers. I'm gonna say it's like $20 to $30 forever, though. Right? What they do is the way that they license it is you buy the current version, which in this case is version 17, and you pay once, and you have the right to that version forever. And as long as it works, you don't have to worry about doing anything else or paying any more. But usually about once a year, they update it to version 18. And if you want version 18, you need to pay again. But you can continue to use version 17 forever. And if you need the additional enhancements, usually most of their enhancements I find are really driven more to running Microsoft Office than anything else, and some other kind of key apps like that people really want to run on Linux. I've used it, I bought it. I don't want to run Office on Linux. Not because I'm anti, commercial, whatever. I just, it doesn't run that well, even through Wine, and I use WPS, and I find that is a better experience than running Windows Office on my Linux machine. The good thing is about Code Weavers in this is that if you're running it, you are paying, but much of their development, in fact, all of their development on Wine associated with Crossover goes back into the open source wine project. So if you're paying for this over here, you can feel reasonably happy that you're also supporting the wine program as well. And that's it. That's our topic of the week, and we're gonna come back in 10 seconds and wrap up this disaster of a show. And we're back, and thanks for sticking with us. You know what? I'm actually a little nervous as to whether this episode is going to be very disjointed, sound quality problems. What's going to happen? It was actually recorded over. It's now almost 7 p.m. in Toronto on the May 26th. I started this at 9 a.m. this morning, so 10 hours ago. And there was some breaks in between, it's been a long day of trying to get this done. And then on top of that, I've got a whole bunch of work stuff that I needed to do that sat by the wayside while I got this episode out. So, and I got it out because I enjoy doing it. It's my creative expression. So thanks for sticking with us. We appreciate your support. We'll be back next week with episode .1 here on Mostly Linux with Mostly Gaming. See you next week.